Welcome to Grandma's Tales audiobook. Today, we have a beautiful bedtime story for toddlers and preschoolers. Sit back, get cozy, and let the magic begin. Deep within the whispering heart of an ancient valley, shielded by emerald mountains and silver-leaved trees, there stood a magnificent kingdom known as the Valley of Dawn. In this valley, time moved slowly, and the night air always smelled of sweet lavender and crushed pine. The people who lived there knew a unique kind of peace, for their kingdom was both incredibly prosperous and wonderfully quiet. Yet the true source of all this prosperity was a wonderful secret, hidden away within the royal velvet stables. It was not a mountain of gold or a mine of diamonds that brought wealth to the king, but a gentle, grey little donkey. This was no ordinary animal. Every single night, as the stars gathered in the dark velvet sky, the donkey would lie down in his quiet corner, and by morning, the straw around him would be filled with heavy, glittering gold coins. But this magic only worked under one very strict and mysterious condition. The donkey would only bring gold if he slept upon a pile of old, rough, faded grey rags. Many years before, the king, feeling deeply grateful for the wealth, had tried to make the animal more comfortable. He ordered his finest weavers to create a magnificent blanket made of soft purple linen and spun gold thread. But when the donkey lay upon the rich fabric, the magic vanished. For 3 whole nights, not a single gold coin appeared. The donkey grew restless and sad. As soon as the king returned the old, dusty grey rags to the floor, the little donkey sighed with contentment, closed his warm brown eyes, and the golden magic instantly returned. From that day on, everyone knew that those simple, rough rags were the most valuable treasure in the entire kingdom. For a long time, the king lived in perfect harmony with his kind queen and their beautiful daughter, Princess Aurelia. Aurelia was a gentle soul who loved the gardens, the rustle of the leaves, and the quiet music of the forest brook. But a chilly autumn came, and the good queen fell deeply ill. As the evening shadows lengthened across the stone floors of the palace, she called the king to her bedside for one final sacred request. "My dearest king," the queen whispered, her voice as soft as a falling leaf. "Promise me one thing before I depart. Promise me that our beloved daughter, Aurelia, will only ever marry someone who loves her truly for exactly who she is. A person whose love is pure, kind, and unconditional, just like the love we have shared." The king, with tears shining in his eyes, pressed her hand to his heart and gave his solemn word. He promised to protect their daughter's future with his very life. But hidden behind the heavy velvet curtains of the bedchamber, a wicked and ambitious nobleman named Lord Malakai was listening to every single word. His heart was filled with greed, and he secretly desired to rule the valley himself. if I can convince the king that I am that perfect lover," Malakai whispered to himself in the dark, "the throne will be mine forever." Weeks turned into months, and the palace remained hushed in mourning. Lord Malakai began his deceitful plan. He constantly approached the grieving king, speaking in deeply exaggerated tones of devotion. He repeated the exact words of the late queen, pretending to care for Princess Aurelia above all else. The king, blinded by his deep grief and his desperate desire to fulfill his promise, began to believe the nobleman's lies. He truly thought Malakai was the one destined to marry his daughter. When Princess Aurelia learned of the impending engagement, her heart filled with dread. She knew Lord Malakai was cold and boastful. She had seen the way he looked at the golden palace walls with hungry eyes. Seeking guidance, Aurelia slipped out of the castle walls late that very night. She walked down to the edge of the glassy palace lake, stepped into a small wooden boat, and paddled quietly into the misty dark. The boat drifted towards a hidden mossy cavern where the wise fairy of the grotto lived. The cavern glowed with a soft, ethereal azure light, and the walls were lined with ancient crystals that hummed a quiet, comforting melody. The fairy arose from the shadows, her gown looking like woven water, and listened closely to the young princess's tears. "Do not despair, little star," the fairy spoke, her voice like smooth glass. "We must test if this nobleman truly possesses the pure love your father believes he has. Go back to the palace, and before you agree to any ceremony, demand a gift that seems entirely impossible to create. Tell your father that you will only say yes if he gives you a gown woven entirely from the fabric of time itself. A dress that changes its color and light with every passing hour of the day." Aurelia returned to the castle and delivered the request, fully believing it would stop the wedding plans. But the king, encouraged by Lord Malakai, was determined to fulfill his late wife's wish. He summoned the most skilled weavers and masters of light from the furthest corners of the earth. They worked in absolute silence, using threads of morning mist, midday sunbeams, and twilight shadows. When the chest was opened, Aurelia gasped softly. The gown was a miracle. At dawn, it blushed a soft raspberry pink. At noon, it shone a brilliant royal blue. And as evening arrived, it faded into a rich, deep violet, sprinkled with the very first starlight. The courtiers cheered, and Lord Malakai smiled his sharp, victorious smile. Heartbroken, Aurelia slipped away once more under the cover of the midnight sky. Her small wooden boat sliced through the dark waters of the lake as she returned to the wise fairy's glowing cavern. "They have made the dress," Aurelia cried softly. "My father is convinced, and the wedding date draws closer. What can I do now?" The fairy tapped her chin, her eyes glittering like stardust. "We shall ask for something even more elusive. Return tomorrow and demand a gown made entirely from the pure, liquid silver blossom of the moon. No mortal hands can catch the moonlight. The next morning, Princess Aurelia stood before the throne and made her second demand. The king, eager to prove his devotion, immediately sent his craftsmen to the highest mountain peaks. For 3 nights, they held silver mirrors up to the full moon, catching its cool beams and spinning them into a thread finer than a spider's silk. When they presented the gown, the entire grand hall fell completely silent. The dress looked like a waterfall of liquid silver, shimmering with a gentle pale glow that softly illuminated the dark stone walls. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and it proved that the king's resources could overcome any magical challenge. Lord Malakai clapped loudly, his greedy heart rejoicing at how close he was to the crown. Time was running out, and the ticking clock of the palace seemed to echo louder with every passing hour. Aurelia, filled with growing anxiety, made her 3rd nighttime journey across the silent lake. "The weavers have captured the moon, kind fairy," she whispered, her hands trembling gently. "The palace is filled with celebration, and I am trapped." The wise fairy smiled gently, placing a warm hand on the princess's shoulder. "Then we shall demand the ultimate light. Ask for a gown made from the blinding gold and warmth of the living sun. If they create that, we will use a different path." The king received the 3rd request with a tired but resolute nod. The golden artisans of the valley built giant furnaces, melting the purest gold until it was as thin as air, mixing it with the bright warmth of the summer afternoon. When the gown was finished, it was so radiant that no one could look directly at it without shielding their eyes. It glowed with its own internal heat, a masterpiece of pure light. Princess Aurelia looked at the golden dress, and she knew she could not stay. She rushed to the cavern one last time. The fairy stood ready, holding a beautiful polished wooden chest and a slender silver wand. "The time has come to leave," the fairy said softly. "But you must take one final thing from the palace to ensure your safety. Go to your father and ask for the old rough grey rags of the golden donkey. If Lord Malakai truly loves you, he will understand that you wish to keep a piece of the kingdom's heart. If he is greedy, he will reveal himself." The next morning, Aurelia walked into the throne room, facing her father and the smiling nobleman. "I will marry," she said quietly, "but I require one last token of your affection. I ask for the old grey rags that our golden donkey sleeps upon." The king gasped, and the entire court began to murmur in disbelief. Lord Malakai's smile instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of pure anger. "The rags!" Malakai shouted, forgetting his polite facade. "Those dirty cloths are the source of all the gold. Without them, the donkey will bring no wealth. You are asking to ruin the kingdom's treasury for a piece of useless garbage." But the king, remembering his sacred promise to his dying queen, looked at his daughter's pleading eyes. He realized that fulfilling his word meant putting his daughter's wishes above the kingdom's gold. "Take them," the king said firmly, ignoring Malakai's furious protests. "A father's promise is worth more than all the gold in the world." That evening, the rough, grey rags were delivered to Aurelia's chamber. Under the cover of total darkness, the princess wrapped the coarse, dusty fabric tightly around her shoulders, hiding her royal presence completely. She took the magic wand and the small chest given by the fairy, which now held her 3 magnificent gowns, and slipped quietly out of the palace gates, leaving her old life behind. Aurelia walked for many days and nights, leaving the Valley of Dawn far behind. The rough rags kept her warm against the chilling wind, but they also hid her identity perfectly. To anyone passing by, she looked like a simple, weary traveller wrapped in an old grey blanket. Eventually, she crossed the border into a neighbouring kingdom and arrived at a large, bustling countryside inn surrounded by great green forests. The master of the inn looked at the quiet girl covered in rough rags and offered her the lowest job available, tending to the farm animals and keeping the swine. The other servants at the inn laughed at her appearance. "Look at her," they jeered softly. "She looks like a little grey donkey herself. Let's call her Donkeyskin." Aurelia did not mind the mocking words. She accepted the name with quiet grace and spent her days in the peaceful fields, talking softly to the animals and listening to the wind in the trees. Her heart found a deep, restful calm in the simplicity of nature. She worked hard, keeping her hands busy and her mind quiet, always wearing the rough grey rags during her chores. However, every Sunday morning, when the innkeeper, the guests, and all the other servants went to the village church, the inn became perfectly still. Aurelia would retreat to her tiny, isolated wooden room at the edge of the property. She would lock the door, tap her magical wand against the floor, and open the fairy's chest. She would take off the dusty grey rags and put on one of her beautiful gowns. One Sunday, it was the dress of time, shifting from pink to gold. The next Sunday, it was the radiant gown of the sun. She would brush her long hair and sit by the window, letting the bright light remind her of who she truly was, feeling a deep sense of peace and joy in the quiet room. One sunny Sunday autumn afternoon, the young prince of that kingdom was returning from a long hunt in the deep forest. He was tired, and as the evening began to fall, he decided to stop at this very inn to rest for the night. As he walked past the quiet, empty courtyard towards his quarters, he noticed a strange, brilliant light emanating from the small window of the lonely room at the edge of the property. Intrigued by the warm golden glow that looked like a trapped star in the dark twilight, the prince stepped softly across the grass. He approached the old wooden structure and peered through the small glass window. The prince froze, completely breathless. Inside the humble room stood the most magnificent girl he had ever seen, dressed in a gown that radiated the pure light of the sun itself. Her face was gentle and kind, and she moved with the grace of a true queen. He stood there in the shadows, enchanted by her quiet beauty, until she turned off the light to rest. The prince walked back to his room, his heart filled with a deep, true love for the mysterious girl. The next morning, the prince asked the innkeeper who lived in that small room, but the innkeeper laughed. "Oh, that is just Donkeyskin, our poor girl who tends the pigs and wears old grey rags." The prince knew that true beauty and nobility were often hidden from careless eyes. He returned to his royal palace, but he grew deeply lovesick, unable to forget the gentle face he had seen through the window. The royal doctors could not find any cure for the prince's heavy heart. Finally, the prince made a strange request to his parents. "I wish for a cake," he said quietly, "but it must be baked specifically by the girl named Donkeyskin, who works at the countryside inn. Only her cooking will bring me comfort." The message was sent to the inn immediately. Aurelia, surprised and deeply touched by the request, shut herself in the kitchen. She washed her hands thoroughly, but kept her rough grey rags on so no one would suspect her. As she kneaded the sweet dough, she carefully slipped her own precious golden ring, the one her mother had given her, into the center of the cake before placing it into the warm oven. The golden, sweet-smelling cake was delivered to the palace on a silver platter. The prince immediately cut a piece, and his fork struck something hard and metallic. He reached into the cake and pulled out a tiny, exquisitely crafted golden ring. He knew at once that this belonged to the mysterious maiden of the sun. The prince stood before the entire court. "I shall marry the woman whose finger this ring perfectly fits," he declared. Every noble lady, duchess and princess in the land came to the palace to try on the ring, but it was far too small and delicate for any of them. Finally, the prince ordered that every woman from the local inns and villages must come as well. The servants from the inn arrived, and at the very back of the line stood Aurelia, wrapped in her old, dusty grey rags. The courtiers laughed when they saw her. "Surely you won't waste your time on a poor swineherd?" Lord Malakai, who had travelled to the kingdom looking for wealth, sneered from the guest seating. But the prince stepped forward, his eyes filled with kindness and respect. He gently took Aurelia's hand and slid the golden ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like a key into a lock. At that exact moment, Aurelia touched her grey rags with her hidden wand. The rough cloth transformed instantly into the magnificent gown of the sun, radiating a warm golden light that filled the entire grand hall. The crowd gasped in astonishment, and the servants fell to their knees in apology. The prince smiled, looking into her warm brown eyes. "I saw your true light long before today," he whispered. Aurelia knew then that she had found a person whose love was pure and unconditional, exactly as her mother had wished. A grand wedding was announced, and invitations were sent to all the neighboring lands. On the day of the ceremony, a magnificent carriage arrived, and out stepped Aurelia's father, the king. He had travelled far, carrying the golden donkey's rags with him as a symbol of his love. When he saw his daughter safe, happy, and standing next to a prince who loved her for who she truly was, tears of pure joy streamed down his face. "I have kept my promise," the king whispered, hugging his daughter tightly. "Your mother would be so proud." Lord Malakai, who had arrived at the wedding hoping to win royal favours, was exposed before both kings for his deceit and his deep greed. By royal decree, he was peacefully stripped of all his titles and privileges, sent away to live as a simple merchant, far from the halls of power he had tried to steal. The kingdom returned to a state of beautiful, quiet harmony. Princess Aurelia and her prince ruled with kindness and wisdom, always remembering that the most valuable treasures in life, like true love, patience, and honesty, are often found hidden beneath the simplest, roughest grey rags. The stars are shining bright over the valley of dawn now, and the little grey donkey is fast asleep on his comfortable bed. Close your eyes, little one, and let your dreams be filled with golden light. For more audiobooks for preschoolers or 3-year-olds, stay on our channel. Good night and sweet dreams.